Everyone say it with me. Sorry, Tranzit.
I'm so sorry.
We didn't know it would get this bad. It's no secret that Tranzit was a dumpster fire of a start for Black Ops 2 Zombies, especially given the momentum the fanbase had after the climactic ending of Moon in Black Ops 1. This video will not only be in defense of Tranzit, but also Moon and Die Rise, and more importantly, this guy. If you don't know who this is, let me catch you up to speed. This is Zielinski, who was the lead animator at Treyarch when developing World at War. During this development, he had a large hand in helping create the infamous Zombies mode. For Black Ops 1, he would be promoted to creative director for the Zombies mode and directly oversee everything between Kino der Toten all the way to Buried in Black Ops 2. But due to Mob of the Dead and Origin's success, Jimmy was forced out of the role to make way for Jason Blundell. In a lot of people's eyes, Tranzit and Die Rise were failures as a result of Jimmy's direction. So why defend him if these maps failed to live up to expectations? Tranzit especially. Tranzit has something under the hood that a lot of modern Zombies maps don't have. Looking at Tranzit on paper, it starts to look, well, legendary. And I might even go as far to say that if the execution was a bit different, it may have been regarded as better than maps like Origins and Mob of the Dead. And yeah, that's crazy to say, but hear me out. Let's just look at the components and features that Tranzit was built on, so you can see what I mean when I say that this map had some serious potential. The broad strokes of Tranzit, is a large open map of various points of interest that are all accessible by foot or by using the bus that makes stops at the main points, but leaving a few to be discovered exclusively on foot. Now take your memory of Tranzit out of your head for a second and think about this concept as a Zombies map. Honestly sounds pretty cool, especially from the ears of a player that has only played World at War and Black Ops 1 Zombies before this. Using those fresh ears, now imagine you add a simple buildable system that expands on the idea of traps and openable areas by making machines that are placeable everywhere and serve many different functions. Again, this sounds pretty sick, and I don't think it's hard to imagine given that this sort of buildable system has been successfully implemented on other maps. And lastly, for the story heads out there, imagine an Easter egg where there are two different quests you can follow, each providing a slightly different story, both advancing the story in their own ways. At this point, hopefully you're seeing the vision of what Tranzit could have been. But the obvious problems for its execution come from two major points. One, the hardware. The PS3 and the Xbox 360 were not strong enough to handle a map at this scale and scope. Just point blank period. And two, time. It's been said many times in interviews with devs, they really did not have the time to complete their full vision of Tranzit. Additions like the fog and the denizens were band-aids over the issues of loading too much terrain in at once and keeping map flow to the bus and not on foot. These were awful solutions to these issues, but they didn't really have time to implement better ones. Truthfully, Jimmy should have known Tranzit's scope was too large, right? Well, if we dig deeper, you'll see why he attempted something so grand, why you should hit the subscribe button, and why his decisions could have been better for the Zombies mode as a whole. Like I mentioned before, Jimmy had been creative lead for all of Black Ops 1 Zombies, which for the most part was a large success. Kino is still beloved and widely considered one of the best designed on-disc maps. It's so easy to just hop in and play. No annoyingly long setup, no confusing layout, just simple zombie killing fun. 5 is a great bonus map that serves as much more of a challenge to the contrast from the casual nature of Kino. Ascension is a great expansion to Kino that keeps it pretty simple while adding 2 new perks, 2 new special grenades to play around with, and for the first time ever, a full Easter egg quest that clue players in on a greater story. So far, Jimmy was firing on all cylinders, but with more success comes more pressure. Call of the Dead continued this with a really unique location and a celebrity cast of characters, not to mention 2 new wonder weapons. Though, when we get to Shangri-La, we got a smaller and far more challenging map. A lot of players didn't like how difficult and little this was. And really, the difficulty of the gameplay wasn't the only form of difficulty. It was also hard to open Pack-a-Punch for reasons that weren't really up to individual players. If you aren't aware, you need the cooperation of every player in your match to step on pressure plates at the same time to open the Pack-a-Punch. And around this time, playing in public matches with randoms was a very popular way to play. So trying to communicate with trolls and players without a mic was very, very difficult. No Pack-a-Punch weapons, harder survival, less fun. And if you really want to nitpick, the wonder weapon on the map doesn't even do any damage by itself. So yeah, pretty divisive map, which at the time wasn't a big deal. Each map was its own experience, and sometimes that experience just wasn't for you. But this will be an important moment for Jimmy down the line, because in retrospect, you can consider it the first sign that Treyarch might be losing faith in him as the lead. To end off Black Ops 1's DLC season, the 4th DLC released with 4 remastered maps from World at War, as well as a final new experience to the game, Moon. Moon is exactly what it sounds like. Zombies on the moon. But this map was also difficult. Though this time, Jimmy showed his hand. We saw into Jimmy's twisted little mind and how he envisioned the zombies mode moving forward. In game design, there's such thing as balance. For a game to be fun, you need balance. Hard obstacles should have solutions that the players can either figure out or earn. Obstacles with no solution is just unfair, and more importantly, not fun. Obstacles that are out of the player's control are especially unfair. So when Moon added a randomly cycling perk to the starting room of Moon, it made it kinda unfair. Juggernog is the most important perk in Black Ops 1 Zombies. More important than modern zombies. With it, you can take 4 hits before downing. And without it, you get 1 warning hit before going down. Jug cycles at spawn with Speed Cola, and it recycles every time you visit spawn. So, if you get Jug right away, you either have to stay in No Man's Land and get the points to buy it before leaving, which is not easy for newer casual players, or you leave, open the whole map, come back, only for it to cycle to Speed Cola, leave again, wait around, come back again, then buy your Jug. And unfortunately, we're only getting started on the unfair things in Moon. When on Moon, you need a helmet to breathe, obviously. Until you turn the power on, that is. Then you can breathe on the interior spaces. But only if you didn't blow the windows out accidentally with grenades or a ray gun. And if you don't let the giant excavator breach the 3 main locations on the map. But going back to game design, as long as there's balancing, or in this case, a way to prevent the excavator, then it should be alright. Well, good news and bad news. Good news, you can stop it with a hacker device. Bad news, now you can't breathe. The hacker takes the same slot as your helmet, which isn't a problem if you haven't lost air in any of the interior spaces yet. The hacker spawns on one side of the map, and to get to the panel to stop the excavator, you have to go down one of 2 paths that could have the excavator drilling down. And if you happen to have not heard or know the name of which tunnel is being drilled into, you may accidentally run into it. Now, Koksky, I hear you asking, how hard is it to avoid a giant buzzsaw? Well, there's this awesome game design feature in Moon called doors. The doors on Moon stay closed until you're pressed right up against them, enough to make HR mad. So it's impossible to see into a hallway or a room that you're heading towards. And thankfully, the excavators aren't the only thing that can surprise you behind a door, because there's also such a thing as zombies in this zombies map. And don't forget the best surprise of them all, the Cosmonaut, who, if you accidentally meet in the A-gap, will headbutt you, send you to a random location on the map, give you 1 hit till death, and take a perk from you, which most of the time ends up being Juggernog, which if you remember from earlier, is not exactly easy to get. Almost all of these design elements are balanced so poorly, and in some cases, too far out of the control of the player. Jimmy Zielinski has done a lot of great things for the zombies mode, don't get me wrong. And really, despite all of these annoyances, Moon was still well enough received, mostly due to its insane climactic Easter egg ending that had players sending rockets to the Earth to destroy it. But this was all foreshadowing, as this would only be another reason for distrusting Jimmy as the zombies lead. And due to the divisive nature of Moon, Jimmy needed a big win with the next map, as it was not only his next map, but it was the on-disc map for the new game. This was the experience that players would be stuck with if they decided not to buy DLC. And unfortunately, Tranzit had very different problems with very similar design philosophy to Moon. The bus was something completely out of the player's control, moving along seemingly whenever it wanted. Buildables were a decent addition, but only being able to carry one part at a time sometimes felt like artificial difficulty, especially when you lock the Wonder Weapon, Power, and Pack-a-Punch behind buildables. Zombies can target certain buildables like the Turbine, which happen to be needed to keep the door open to Pack-a-Punch. And this wouldn't be much of an issue if the place you needed to put the Turbine wasn't across the map from Pack-a-Punch. Meaning, it's possible to place your Turbine, successfully open PAP, but by the time you get there, zombies have already destroyed your Turbine, closing the door. Not to mention a cool electric boss that is only defeatable, temporarily, if you have one of 2 different equipments to disable him. Not to mention the fog, and the denizens, and the lava. I can go on and on about Tranzit's faults, but that's not what I'm here to harp on, because I want to harp on what it did right. I think the poor balance was not only a good thing for zombies, but the thing zombies needs more. I promise I'm not crazy. I think there's an art to things in video games being unbalanced. To see where I'm coming from, let's compare it to an all-timer, a big dog, and often considered the peak of zombies. Origins was the final nail in the coffin for Jimmy Zielinski, because, well, Origins is just designed in an easier way. Each of Origins' obstacles have easier and more fair ways to overcome them. Holes on the bottom of the robot's foots, red lights on the Panzerclaw, tanks for the mud, etc. But it also gave us something that was so well designed, it kind of stopped real innovation for the zombies mode. It cracked the code if there ever was one. And not just for the next game, every single zombies game that followed it. The magnum opus of zombies map design. Buildable, elemental, wonder weapons. Sure, Everyone gets their own wonder weapon. That's sick. But now you're guaranteed a wonder weapon every time you play. And that sounds pretty sick. But no, I promise, this isn't as good of a thing as you might think. In a horde, wave-based survival game like Zombies, the replayability is entirely dependent on variability, which means the different kinds of things that can happen throughout your game that make each playthrough unique. Maybe you died on round 13, but if you had just gotten a better weapon from the box, or gotten an insta-kill at the right time, you might have gotten farther. This is a common thing in the roguelike genre of games. Binding of Isaac relies on the randomness of enemies, bosses, room layouts, and items that you encounter on each playthrough. Zombies was pretty similar in the beginning, and even more so in Tranzit, but I'll get to that in a sec. Each map had a mix of good and bad weapons in the mystery box. The box was a real gamble because you genuinely didn't know what you would get, and if it would benefit you in the long run. In Origins, why worry about that when you know you'll end up with a wonder weapon, regardless of how many players you're playing with? This is further made worse by the addition of more weapons to the box, all of which are pretty strong. Not to mention the new weapons on the wall are also pretty strong. Now, looking back on Jimmy Zielinski's maps, like Tranzit, Moon, and Die Rise, you see that weapon balance is unbalanced, but on purpose and with precision. Weapons in Black Ops 2 Zombies, more so the Zielinski maps, are on a spectrum of really bad to really good. On the bad end of the spectrum, you have the SMR and the EMP grenades. Overall, pretty useless, regardless of upgrades. Then, a tier above, you have weapons like the Cap 40 or the Chickum. These guns are pretty bad with ammo and damage, but because of their low damage bullets, the point output is much faster, so you're rewarded for surviving with these weapons. Then, a tier above that, you have weapons like the RPG, the War Machine, or even the Olympia. These weapons are really hard to make work without perks and into the later rounds, but when you upgrade them, they shine. Then you have the middle tier, which has most of the weapons in the game. The rest of the shotguns, most of the assault rifles, the wall weapons. But then you get to the upper tiers. Guns like the DSR-50, the Hammer, the Galil. All of these weapons are the ones that you want to hold on to for later rounds. And of course, the final tier, which usually only consists of the wonder weapons of the map. To make the Binding of Isaac comparison again, how fun would Binding of Isaac really be if it were all good items that you can get in each run? Or more specifically, if you could just run a particular path each time you played, and you were guaranteed the most powerful item of your choice. Now, you should be able to see the unappreciated genius of Jimmy Zielinski's map design. Tranzit varies per playthrough with what weapons you get from the mystery box, which parts you decide to install on the bus to upgrade it. Do you save the ladder for the bus or the roof of the diner? Do you stay on the bus and survive there, or do you pick a stop and hold out? Do you stay on the beaten path, or do you wander through the fog to find Nocturne Toten? Moon is also very similar to this. The obstacles in Moon are very RNG based and therefore give you a different experience every time. Some Moon playthroughs, you may get the wave gun first box pull, successfully avoid the cosmonaut through each doorway, and get Jug when you first spawn in the map. But obviously in other playthroughs, you may have the opposite happen. Even Die Rise, where will you place the trample steam? Will you take the broken elevator, or take calculated jumps to work your way down the building? Will you stick with the classic quick revive, or give yourself the challenge of Who's Who, where you get the chance to revive yourself? Going back to Origins, and specifically the buildable wonder weapons, how many playthroughs of Origins have you had where you just completely avoid the staffs? Or how many playthroughs have you had where you had a different game plan than usual going into it? Origins, in its nature, is designed with very little variability in mind. But it was player-friendly, so people took to it. But how does Blundell's player-friendly philosophy ultimately stop innovation for zombies going forward? Well, let's look at Black Ops 3. How many of those maps have buildable/questable wonder weapons? Of the 6 main maps, 3 of them do. That's half. What about Black Ops 4? Well, of its 8 maps, all of them contain buildable and questable wonder weapons. In fairness, a lot of these maps in Black Ops 4 have them in the box as well, but some of them don't. And also, why use the box as your only method of getting these weapons if you could just build them? Cold War and Black Ops 6 are a similar story, so you get the idea. For me personally, as time has gone on, the buildable wonder weapon has made each map less and less replayable. To be fair, Tranzit is also guilty of this, but the journey to each part is much more treacherous and interesting. And let's be honest, how often are we really building the jet gun on Tranzit? This buildable wonder weapon problem is further exacerbated when you add in the 4 separate elemental upgrades, or in some cases, just multiple separate wonder weapons. Since Origins has come out, there have been 6 more Treyarch maps that have had 4 separate wonder weapon upgrades. This isn't even including maps like Tog der Toten, Blood of the Dead, and Revelations, who also have multiple wonder weapons in the map. This also isn't including non-Treyarch maps. So it's pretty safe to say that the whole guaranteed wonder weapon for every player thing is a bit overdone. And going back to the wonder weapon balancing and viability, since Origins, each Zombies mode has made relentless effort in making every weapon good or at least a viable option. Black Ops 3 weapons all felt the same for the most part. And because of double Pack-a-Punch abilities, you can literally take any weapon in the game to round 100. Black Ops 4 was pretty similar in this way, but Cold War took it to a whole nother level, because now there's such a thing as weapon tiering. Each weapon can start off a gray tier, and using salvage, a new currency in the game, you can upgrade each weapon to high tiers so they become viable. Now, if you weren't aware of this, you might be asking, but isn't that what Pack-a-Punch is for? And to that I say, yeah, it should be. Pack-a-Punch is still there, so instead of just spending points to upgrade your weapon, you also have to spend the new currency and manage that to upgrade your weapon with. I think you can start to see why we all owe an apology to Tranzit, and even more so Jimmy Zielinski. Though his execution may have been poor in a lot of places, Jimmy understood what Jason and the ones who followed him have yet to grasp: the art of unbalance, RNG, and replayability. Black Ops 6 and Black Ops 7 are shining examples of not really knowing how to approach difficulty. Weapon variants and loadouts are ways that appease the camo grind and the casual players, but what's the point of the mystery box anymore? You can get the wonder weapon through a monotonous and repeatable step-by-step process, and you can take your favorite normal weapon in the game with you from the start. With each map having the same or recycled boss zombies from previous maps, the mode is just simply not replayable anymore. All of this is to say that there are still plenty of people that enjoy the newer maps much more than Zielinski's maps. But for me, personally, I always wondered how different would zombies look if they had just leaned heavier into roguelike elements and committed to replayability rather than accessibility.